I respect this court, but I'm innocent. I would never, under any circumstances, hurt my wife, Maggie, and I would never, under any circumstances, hurt my son, Paw.
Well, and it might not have been you. It might have been the monster you become when you take 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 opioid pills. Maybe you become another person. In the murder of your wife, Maggie Murdaugh, I sentence you for the term of the rest of your natural life. For the murder of Paul Murdaugh, whom you probably loved so much, I sentence you to prison for murdering him for the rest of your natural life.
Imagine having the kind of family people admire, the smiling photos, the warm home, the promise of a future that looked steady and safe. Then imagine throwing all of it away in one irreversible moment. Not for love, not for protection, but for a choice that ended in a courtroom and locked you inside a box you will never walk out of. Today, the question people ask isn't, why did he break? It's how someone with a picture-perfect life could decide that the very people who trusted him the most would never see another day. Because now, instead of waking up to your children's voices, you open your eyes to an 8 by 10-foot concrete cell that will never get bigger. You eat when you're told, sleep when you're told, and count the years you will never get back. You hear other inmates yelling through steel doors. You feel the cold floors. And you know this isn't temporary. There are no weekend visits home, no second chances, no finding yourself after a mistake. The rest of your life is mapped out inside this building. In the world outside, those quiet dinners, the daily routines, the simple sound of a car starting in your driveway is gone. All because of a decision that turned a family home into a crime scene and turned a father into inmate number 1. This is what life behind bars looks like for a man who destroyed the very thing he was supposed to protect. And the truth is harsher than any sentence written on paper.
This is the reality for Alex Murdaugh, once a powerful attorney, heir to a century-old legal dynasty, a man who walked into every courtroom with confidence and influence. Today, he wakes up in a concrete room no bigger than a walk-in closet, serving a sentence that guarantees he will never breathe free air again. Most people think they understand what that means. They don't. Because behind these prison walls, his life is not just restricted. It is stripped down to something many describe as worse than the death penalty itself. The fall was public, but the daily reality is hidden. No private offices, no family dinners, no quiet drives through low-country roads he once knew better than anyone. Instead, every morning begins with the same steel door, the same noise, the same eyes watching him because of who he is. Not just another inmate, but a former attorney who once controlled the fate of men just like the ones he now lives beside. And here's what most people never hear about: the isolation, the threats, the constant surveillance, the choices he no longer gets to make, the routine that grinds you down until time itself stops feeling real. For Murdaugh, this isn't just punishment. It is a future that offers no exit. Stay with me, because what happens inside these walls and what it reveals about his downfall will change the way you see this case.
It was September of 2021 when the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court assigned me to preside over the pending investigations involving the various offenses that you are being investigated for, initially including these financial crimes and the murder cases. And I have lived with this case now for over 2 years, and I have 34 days left before active retirement. And after imposing this sentence, your life will continue. I will turn the page and leave you behind. You're quite an enigma. a person that many of us thought we knew. And as I stated earlier, I can only recall you as being a fun-loving, happy person. I've never seen you sad. I've never seen you being anything other than a friendly, caring person. And it's so disappointing to see you again in this setting. I believe the last time we saw each other and you were not in jail was at a conference when you were poolside having a good time. And as it turns out, that was a couple of months after the passing of your wife and son.
For anyone who doesn't know the full scope, Alex Murdaugh was sentenced in March 2023 to 2 consecutive life sentences for the murders of his wife, Maggie Murdaugh, and his son, Paul. Judge Clifton Newman's words were direct, quote, "For the murder of your wife, Maggie, I sentence you to the rest of your natural life. For the murder of your son, Paul, I sentence you to prison for the rest of your natural life." But that was only the start. Murdaugh later received 40 additional years in federal prison for financial crimes, along with 27 more years for separate state financial offenses. The man who once moved millions, lived on a sprawling estate, and carried the name of one of South Carolina's most powerful families now wakes up in a space smaller than most people's bathrooms. And that brings us to the question almost everyone asks. What does life actually look like for him now? And more importantly, why do so many people say this punishment is harsher than death itself? By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. But before we get into the daily routine, the surveillance, the isolation, and the restrictions, we need to go back to the moment he first arrived at Kirkland Correctional Institution. Because the very first thing that happened to him is something that would mentally break most people before they ever reach their cell. To understand how devastating this reality is for Alex Murdaugh, you need to see what he lost and how far the fall truly was.
Alex Murdaugh wasn't just a lawyer. He was the product of a legal dynasty that spent nearly a century controlling the Low Country's courts, prosecutions, and politics. His ancestors served as solicitors, wielded influence across multiple counties, and shaped outcomes inside the same justice system that would eventually turn on him. He lived in a home most people never even get to walk through, Moselle, the family's 1,700-acre hunting property. He drove high-end vehicles, vacationed in beach houses, wore expensive clothing, and moved money with the confidence only inherited power provides. His yearly income from the law firm stretched well into the hundreds of thousands, with additional earnings from settlements, fees, and family connections. Today, none of that exists. Nearly everything he once owned has been sold off to repay victims. The law firm that carried his family name no longer stands behind him. The reputation his family built over generations is gone, erased in a matter of months. And instead of boardrooms or courtrooms, he now stands in line for meal trays under fluorescent lights. When Murdaugh arrived at Kirkland in March 2023, he was immediately placed in protective custody, not as a privilege, but as a necessity. High-profile inmates, especially those accused of violent crimes involving their own families, are at serious risk inside general population. Officers knew that placing him with other inmates could result in instant retaliation from people who saw him as an opportunity to gain status or settle personal resentments. During intake, corrections officials strip-searched him, photographed him, and issued him standard prison clothing, khaki pants, and a button-up shirt. Every personal belonging was taken. No custom suits, no expensive watch, no wallet, no phone, no symbols of the influence he once carried. He was given an inmate number and escorted to an 8 by 10 foot protective custody cell, bare concrete on every side, a metal bunk with a thin mattress, a steel toilet and sink combination, a small, narrow window that barely lets in natural light. That first night, according to staff accounts, is when the reality settled in. After decades of privilege, power, and control, he was reduced to a small concrete room where time moves slowly and there is nowhere to hide from the weight of what happened. The silence of the cell is only interrupted by the echoing shouts of other inmates, door slamming, and officers conducting checks. It is a constant reminder that life as he once knew it has ended permanently. And what happened during his first month in protective custody revealed something that surprised even prison officials. Murdaugh was not ready for the psychological strain of incarceration. The challenges weren't the threats or the restrictions, but something far more basic, something the outside world takes for granted every single day. Now, picture the start of a typical day for Alex Murdaugh. The lights switch on at 5:30 a.m. automatically, without warning, without choice. He cannot control when the day begins. His routine no longer belongs to him. It belongs entirely to the institution.
One more thing, JJ, going back, I do want to tell you as to how close I feel to you. My wife loved you, and you are absolutely right about everything you said, but you are dead wrong about one thing, and I would never hurt Maggie, and I would never hurt Paul. And it is important to me that you know that, because she did love you, and I hope you know that. And I hope you know that I mean what I say here today.
There's no snooze button behind the walls of McCormick Correctional Institution. There's no sunlight creeping through curtains, no gentle start to the morning. At 5:30 a.m. sharp, the fluorescent lights snap on with no warning, flooding Alex Murdaugh's 8 by 10-foot cell in a burst of cold brightness. It's a jarring start that breaks the last remnants of privacy he once enjoyed. Breakfast follows a half hour later, pushed through the slot in his cell door. For someone who spent decades eating gourmet meals, traveling to expensive restaurants, and entertaining clients at upscale venues, this is a brutal adjustment. The food is designed to meet basic nutritional requirements, not comfort anyone. Lukewarm oatmeal, powdered eggs, a single carton of milk. Nothing seasoned, nothing warm, nothing familiar. Just fuel. And after that meal comes the part of prison life that crushes men at a psychological level: the waiting. Because in protective custody, movement is practically non-existent. Inmates in this unit spend close to 23 hours a day alone in their cells. For Murdaugh, that means 23 hours of the same walls, the same silence, the same routine that will never change. His 1 hour of recreation isn't really recreation at all. He isn't stepping onto a field or walking across a yard. Protective custody inmates are escorted to a small concrete enclosure, a box with chain link fencing overhead, meant to prevent drones, contraband drops, or escape attempts. There is no grass, no tree, no shade, just open sky and confinement. A former inmate who was housed near Murdaugh described something that caught the attention of both inmates and officers. Murdaugh would pace in circles, talking to himself, mumbling thoughts that only he could hear. This behavior isn't unusual. Psychologists say it is common among inmates kept in long-term isolation. It's a sign of mental strain, the early stages of a mind trying to fill the silence that never ends. Lunch arrives at noon, dinner arrives at 5, and lights go out at 10 o'clock every night. The sameness, the lack of control, the monotony, that is the part most people underestimate. Because this routine doesn't last for days or weeks. It lasts forever. And while many assume the slow grind of prison life is the worst part of Murdaugh's existence, the truth is far more complicated. Because what happened only a few months into his sentence exposed the desperation that was already setting in. In August 2023, barely 5 months after arriving, Murdaugh made headlines again, but this time from deep inside the prison system. Officials discovered he had been passing information to documentary filmmakers through unauthorized communication. In prison, communication is tightly controlled. Every inmate is given a personal PIN number that allows them to make monitored calls. Using another inmate's number is considered a serious rule violation because it bypasses the monitoring system. Investigators say Murdaugh convinced another inmate to let him use their PIN to make untracked calls to his attorney, Dick Harpootlian, so he could relay journal entries and personal reflections intended for an outside documentary. On June 10, 2023, correctional officials intercepted one of these calls. Murdaugh was caught reading from his private writings, attempting to share his own interpretation of the case and his internal thoughts. The punishment was immediate and harsh. He lost telephone privileges for 30 days, lost canteen privileges for 30 days, and lost his tablet, the only device that allows inmates controlled access to reading material, digital messages, and educational programs. Most people might shrug at the idea of losing a tablet or snack access, but inside prison, these privileges are everything. The phone is your only connection to your family. The canteen is where you buy basic hygiene items and small comforts like instant coffee. And the tablet is the closest thing inmates have to mental escape. For 30 days, Murdaugh had none of it. No calls to his surviving son, Buster. No canteen purchases. No digital reading or communication. Just the walls, the silence, and the weight of reality. But what happened after this disciplinary action opened the door to an even darker chapter, one that raised serious questions inside and outside the prison system. Because soon after, a former dorm mate came forward with explosive allegations about Murdaugh's conduct behind bars. According to this source, Murdaugh wasn't simply surviving prison, he was influencing it. The dorm mate claimed Murdaugh was acting as a financial behind-the-scenes operator, using outside connections and remaining access to funds to direct contraband operations. Now, let's be clear. These are allegations, not proven facts. No agency has confirmed that Murdaugh himself orchestrated smuggling. But the reason these claims gained national attention is because something significant happened shortly afterward. In July 2024, a South Carolina grand jury indicted 5 corrections officers at McCormick Correctional Institution on charges of corruption, drug trafficking, and smuggling of illegal cell phones into the maximum security prison. This scandal created a wave of speculation. It confirmed that corruption existed inside the facility, and it aligned with what the former inmate claimed. The dorm mate alleged that Murdaugh's remaining outside connections made him valuable to corrupt staff members. The inmate suggested money was exchanged, items were smuggled in, and Murdaugh benefited from access other inmates could only dream of. Again, these are statements, not verified, but the timing raised questions. The indictments proved the system was compromised, and the allegations about Murdaugh's involvement sparked national debate about whether he is fully complying with the restrictions of his sentence or manipulating them. Multiple investigative journalists have since reported that the South Carolina Department of Corrections increased monitoring around high-profile inmates, including Murdaugh, after the smuggling scandal. And this leads to a larger, more uncomfortable reality. Even with life sentences, even with reduced privileges, and even with a ruined reputation, Murdaugh remains a figure whose presence creates pressure, attention, and controversy inside the prison walls. His days may be structured, his movements controlled, and his freedoms gone, but the story of what he is experiencing behind bars is far more complicated than anyone expected.
The truth is simple. Alex Murdaugh cannot accept the world he lives in now. He cannot accept the cell. He cannot accept the silence. He cannot accept the fact that every door is locked from the outside and always will be. He is a man who spent decades commanding courtrooms, influencing outcomes, and controlling narratives. Now, he is just another inmate in khaki, stripped of authority, stripped of status, stripped of the illusion that he still matters. But what's even more striking is how hard he's trying to hold onto the ghost of who he used to be. Even behind concrete walls, he is desperately reaching for scraps of the life that ended the moment the jury delivered its verdict. And prison officials have seen it. They've watched it. And some of what they've seen has stunned even the most seasoned correctional staff. Because even after the disciplinary hearing, the loss of privileges, and the isolation of protective custody, Murdaugh hasn't stopped trying to feel important. In August 2024, internal reports revealed how Murdaugh was choosing to spend his time. And honestly, it's equal parts fascinating and tragic. Sources inside the South Carolina Department of Corrections say Murdaugh has taken up chess, playing quietly with other protective custody inmates during the rare times they are allowed out of their cells. For a man who once dissected legal arguments, negotiated million-dollar settlements, and built strategies for high-stakes trials, chess is the closest thing he has left to intellectual stimulation. But the setting is bleak. There's no polish to a table, no frame degrees on the wall, no clients waiting for his expert judgment. Just an old plastic board, pieces worn down by years of use, a prison day room with peeling paint, and the sound of metal doors slamming in the background. This is the only strategy he gets to practice now. Not in a courtroom, but in a room filled with men who will never see freedom again. And it gets worse. Reports also confirm Murdaugh now has a prison job, basic labor, the kind of work inmates perform for pennies. Some jobs in protective custody pay around 20 to 25 cents an hour. For someone who once earned hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, this is a humbling daily reminder of how far he has fallen. Every hour he works, every task he completes, every paycheck worth less than what he once tipped a waiter, all of it reinforces the same truth. He will never again be who he was. These attempts at building a routine might look harmless, but they expose something deeper, something vital to understanding why Murdaugh's sentence may genuinely be worse than death. Because he isn't just living a new life. He is being forced to live with the old one. Every hour is a mirror. Every task is a reminder. Every thought ties him back to the moment he destroyed everything he touched. But the most brutal part of his incarceration isn't the cell, or the food, or the monotony. It's the distance, the emotional distance from the only family he has left. Under South Carolina's rules, Murdaugh is allowed limited visitation. But these visits are nothing like the family gatherings he once hosted. They take place in a controlled setting, under surveillance, with corrections officers watching closely. There is a glass barrier separating him from the person on the other side. No physical contact, no hugs, no privacy, no comfort. And every phone call he makes, every single one, is monitored, recorded, and subject to review. His conversations with his surviving son, Buster, aren't heart-to-heart talks. They are slow, awkward, painful exchanges where both men know the truth. Nothing about their relationship will ever be normal again. Sources close to the family say Buster's first visit to the prison was emotionally devastating for both of them. Imagine being a son and sitting across from your father, the man who raised you, knowing he murdered your mother and your brother. Imagine being a father and looking into the eyes of the only child you have left, knowing you destroyed his entire world. This is the part of the story people don't fully understand. The suffering doesn't end with the sentence.
it multiplies. Psychologists who specialize in long-term incarceration have explained that life without parole is uniquely damaging. There is no timeline, no countdown, no final date, no closure, just a stretching, endless future of repetition and regret. And for a man like Murdaugh, the impact is even heavier. He is 56 years old. If he lives to age 80, that means 24 more years, 8,760 more days, 210,240 more hours in an 8x10 cell. That's more time than many people even spend working in their entire careers. Research shows inmates in protective custody experience higher levels of psychological decline. The isolation, the lack of meaningful human interaction, and the absence of purpose take their toll. Depression spikes. Anxiety takes hold. Sleep becomes fractured. Thoughts become distorted. Some inmates develop paranoia. Some become withdrawn. Some begin talking to themselves. Some lose their grip on reality. And here's the part that most viewers may not realize. Murdaugh has no future to look forward to. No parole hearing, no possibility of release, no legal loophole waiting in the shadows. Even if somehow he overturned his murder convictions, which legal experts say is virtually impossible, he still faces 40 years in federal prison, 27 years in state prison. That's 67 years for financial crimes alone. At 56 years old, his theoretical release age would be 123. So when people say Alex Murdaugh will die in prison, they are not being dramatic. They are stating a fact, a mathematical reality, a legal certainty. And that leaves us to the final question, the one that hits hardest. Is life behind bars actually a harsher punishment than a death sentence? Ask yourself, what is worse, a quick, permanent end or decades of slow mental deterioration? What hurts more, execution or waking up every day knowing exactly what you did to your own family? What lasts longer, the fear of dying or the fear of living in a world where everyone knows your actions and no one sees you as human? What would break a man faster, a lethal injection or a lifetime of reminders that he destroyed his son's life, his family legacy, and every future he could have had? For someone who had wealth, privilege, respect, and influence, this is the definition of a fall from grace so steep it almost defies comprehension. Every cold meal is a reminder of what he once enjoyed. Every command from a correctional officer is a blow to the ego he spent decades inflating. Every night on that thin mattress is a reminder that this is not temporary. Every monitored call with Buster forces him to relive the murders. Every echo in the hallway reminds him he is not powerful, special, or respected. There is no end date, no mercy, no peace. Just time, and more time, and more time. And for many, that is the most brutal punishment a human being can receive. So let me ask you, would you rather face a death sentence or spend the rest of your natural life inside a concrete box with nothing but your thoughts and the memory of what you destroyed? Drop your answer in the comments below.